apologize for calling you to order late. The quick glance at the clock should have told me it's not 10 to 10, it can't be 10 to 10. No. Somehow I thought it was 10 to 7. So I'll call the meeting to order and ask Ellie to take attendance, please.
Bernadette Clément.
Merci. Présente.
Todd Bennett.
Present.
Eric Bergeron.
Present.
Maurice Dupas sent his regrets. Sid Gardner.
Here.
Glenn Grant.
Present.
Caroline Hébert.
Présent.
Dean Hollingsworth.
Yep.
Elaine McDonald.
Present.
Claude McIntosh.
Here.
Justin Towndale.
Present.
Amanda Brisson.
Here.
Ron Symington.
Here.
Thank you.
Good. Are there any additions or corrections to be made to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Glenn Grant, seconded by Amanda Brisson. All in favor? Thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared? So, seeing none, we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes of the last PAC meeting. Madam Mayor and Sid Gardner, all in favor? Thank you. And we have a presentation this evening. It is a PowerPoint presentation which will be provided by PAC Design in the person of Mr. Mike Tosher, who will showcase the final draft of the updated master plan for the city's waterfront. PAC Design has worked closely with the city's planning department to develop the new waterfront master plan for discussion and feedback and to seek approval from PAC Council. And as I wish to inform you that this is a non-legislated public meeting item, and so PAC will determine if they wish to receive commentary and input from the public. And if so, I'd like to see a motion, please. Councillor Grant, your motion?
That public participation.
Very good. Seconded by Councillor Towndale. All in favor? Thank you. And I would ask that if somebody does choose to speak, they give us their name and their address, and then state your question or comment, whatever it is. So now, I'll ask the PAC Secretary to review the public notice requirement.
So there was no specific notice requirement for this presentation, so we will simply invite Mr. Tosher to the front.
Very good. Welcome, Mr. Tosher.
Thank you. So thank you very much. This is the second presentation that we've done. So again, my name is Mike Tucker with PAC Design. So I represent the team tonight that's put together the plans. Also, Mary Catherine Mihak, another consultant on the team with us. And she is focusing primarily on the consultation side of the project. So tonight I'm going to try to keep this presentation fairly brief so we can focus on questions. I've got 5 areas I want to talk about, refresh everyone's memory on the project intent, process and schedule we went through to develop the plan. I'm very briefly going to touch on the recommendations. Last time I presented, most of the presentation focused on the recommendations. There are a lot of them, there's 77, so we're not going to go through each and every one. I do want to talk about the priority matrix results, which then fed into the implementation strategies. So that's where number 4 and 5 are going to be where most of the attention is going to be focused on the presentation. So project intent, update and build upon the 2007 waterfront plan, provide a vision for the future of Cornwall's waterfront, consult with the community and stakeholders, provide a progressive framework to address the important economic, social, cultural, and environmental benefits of the waterfront. So again, this is very much a plan that was focused on community consultation, developing an in-Cornwall solution, and all the recommendations that were developed here in the focus of the plan is really based on that consultation. So the study began about a little over a year ago in spring of 2018. We did a series of stakeholder interviews, about 30 of them, for different individuals and groups in May, June, and September. We then had an introductory open house, number 1 in June 2018. Design charrette, which was open house number 2 in November 2018. And out of that is where we developed the initial 77 recommendations that we presented this with PAC on March 18th. Shortly following that, we had open house number 3 where we presented those 77 recommendations on a series of panels, and had the community provide feedback as well as go through an exercise what we call is commonly known as a democracy. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. At the suggestion of this group, we also had some additional consultation by posting the boards at the Benson Center, and they were up for about a week and a half, as well as online. It was an opportunity for people to provide feedback and give their input on their preferences as well. And so based on all of that, we then developed the forecasting and implementation strategy. We advanced until May or June, and then that was coming up with the final draft plan. So there are 77 recommendations, and they're organized into 6 areas, and this is consistent with what we presented before. There's the waterfront-wide recommendations, there's 9 of those, and then we have recommendations under each area of the waterfront. And this is building on what was in the 2007 plan, organizing it by these 5 areas. And so I'll go through those now briefly, and I'll show you some additional images we've created. I'll move on from there. So waterfront-wide recommendations, there's 9 of those, focusing on enhancements which address needs across the entire waterfront and create a cohesive and enjoyable user experience. So again, these are waterfront-wide, but they're applied to all the different areas. Guidon Park, we have 10 recommendations, and they're focused on promoting and attracting users to the park to increase use. And we really, we heard this loud and clear from the consultation that we felt that Guidon Park was a real asset, but was underutilized. So we were looking at providing additional activities and programming during all seasons, and improving water access, in particular swimming, which we kept hearing about, but probably is the only real location where swimming is feasible, just because of currents elsewhere along the waterfront, as well as boating and views to the water. So for each of the areas, we identify on a plan the different locations for the recommendations. And we then go through in the report, we describe each of those in detail. So the next image is we've done a series of before and afters focusing on key recommendations. So this one here is looking at beach improvements at Guidon Park, and we have heard that there is an interest in swimming. And currently, of course, the road is very close to the water's edge, so we're suggesting in the bottom image, shifting the road over, increasing the size of the beach, and then providing some sort of dock that would separate the boat launch area. And then the background of that bottom image, to the right-hand corner, we're showing a floating playground, which is common. So this is showing a bunch of different of the improvements that we're recommending, and some or all of these could be done. They're not all contingent on happening at the same time, or they're not connected to one another. So that in the future you decide you want to do one or the other, you could pick and choose. Canal lands, we have 22 recommendations for the canal lands. We're focused on providing a safe and easier access to the canal. We're focused on both public open space and infill development. We've heard that there is concern about developing, of course, along the waterfront and blocking public access, but there are locations where the public could get access to the waterfront and still be allowed for development in certain locations. Improving connectivity along both sides of the canal. Of course, on the north side of the canal, there is limited access, so improving that. And then providing infrastructure to support recreation, such as paddle sports, rowing, skating, cycling, things like that. So that's what these 22 recommendations are focused on. Again, each of these 22 are described in more detail in the final report. Provided a plan, first image showing the west side of the waterfront, and then the second image showing the east side of the canal. And then you can skip down to the montage, the next one. So this again is the sort of before and after, showing the top of the existing conditional canal lands, and then the bottom image there showing a number of improvements related to opportunities for rowing, providing a rowing course, improvements to pathways, widening it slightly, providing wayfinding, so people can know who are not familiar with the area, how far is it to say, Lock 19 or to the downtown, signage along the markers and that sort of thing. And then the next image is showing the winter scene for one above that. So it's showing winter scene of ice skating, which we have heard was a suggestion that should be investigated, as well as opportunities for cross-country skiing and that sort of thing. So the next area is Lamoureux Park. We have 16 recommendations there, organizing the park around an east-west canal promenade and the new park face on Water Street. Designated spaces for gathering and celebrations throughout the park, and improve the water access. So, next slide showing 16 recommendations, and then a plan and implementation. And we have two photo montages for the Lamoureux Park. The first one showing improved waterfront interface. So what we mean by that, so showing the bottom image there, showing some sort of steps down to the water, potentially accessible, and planting along the shore to reduce the amount of mowing, grass. And then the second image showing the concept of the Canal Promenade, so along Water Street, and this again is a feature to help connect the park to the street, bring activities closer, and connecting a lot of those uses that are already along the park face. So things like the wing, the museum, the playground, parking lots, that sort of thing. So providing that spine along the waterfront to provide access to those different areas. Next one, Harbour to College. So we have 13 recommendations here, and these are focused on Point Moline enhancements, improvements, and connections with Lamoureux Park and the Cornwall Harbour, and also looking at future development infill projects at the La Framboise site and the former Transport Canada site. And again, we have a plan showing the location for those. The image we're showing here is for the Cornwall Harbour. So this is consistent, I think, with some of the other proposals that have been shown over the years. And basically looking at maximizing the potential there. Maybe shops, restaurants, that sort of thing. Water docking for tour type boats. And then the last area is East Front. So we have 7 recommendations in these improvements of key locations on the section of the waterfront, and providing improvements to access key locations. So the photo montage we're showing here is for Boundary Road Boat Launch, the top being before, and bottom one is showing enhancements. Again, just enhancing what's already there, but improving better boat launching, both for boats on trailer as well as small craft. Facilities for getting better than that. So based on the 77 recommendations that we took to the public back in April, we developed a priority matrix. And we did, I think the last time I was at PAC, we talked about what those 10 criteria would be and the scoring, and we also had asked the public to comment on that as well. So the matrix helps us score each project and help determine priority. And it's not the only factor used, but it's one factor that helps us organize so many different recommendations. So part of that was the open house exercise of dotmocracy, so that was open house number 3. And we had asked people to select their top 12 projects. We gave them 12 dots, and they had to place on one of those 12 dots on 77 different projects. And in the matrix, we've weighted that dotmocracy exercise as 20% of the overall score. So it's a fairly large amount, but it's not 50%. The other factors also play a part, but 20% was the largest of all of those 10 criteria. And Appendix G in the report provides the matrix scoring details and the results, so you can see exactly how projects were scored. And in the next few slides, we'll show you the results. And my eyes are going, so I can't actually read those. Every time I come to Cornwall, I remember that I probably should get glasses for this. But anyway, this shows you the top, the results for 1 to 26. So you can see on the far right column, if your eyesight's better than mine, they're all numbered 1 through 26. And you can see some of them are numbered with the same one to the tie, obviously. These numbers haven't rounded off, so that's why the first two don't actually aren't tied for one of them actually is slightly ahead. But again, this is only one factor we use, so we don't go totally on this matrix results, but again, it's to help us organize the data to make some sense. So the next slides are showing 27 to 52 and 53 to 77. So the next slide. So this talks about our implementation strategy. So we use that information as one factor to forecast the project's area. So we have outlined a sequence for over a 25-year period. So remember that this plan is for 10 years, but we do have 77 projects, and I don't think that no matter how ambitious Cornwall wanted to be, you're not going to be able to do 77 projects in 10 years. So we've given a 25-year plan, but the idea being that we revisit it after 10 years, see how you're doing, and to see if you implemented what you thought you would, and you advanced if you did anything. And so really, just a starting point for revisiting the plan. In that implementation forecast, I'll show you in the next slide. We do show costs. So we're showing the cost for each individual line as well as a total across the bottom. Now we can just go back to this.
Yeah, go back.
So again, I've said this before that the matrix, the sequence considers a matrix, but also there's certain dependencies that we've identified, efficiencies, and the planning that has to happen. Land ownership, of course, is an issue to consider, and budget. So the next one. So just a quick explanation of how to read the forecast. And this is years 1 to 5, and there is a 6 to 11, etc. And if you look at this, it's color coded. So the blue is for waterfront wide, the green is for Union Park, the yellow is for canal lands, orange for Lamoureux, the purple is for Harvard College, and then East Front is the red. So there's also, each one is coded, so we've used consistent coding throughout the plan. So when you look at when something's L5 on the description, the recommendations, it's carried through this table and all the other tables to be consistent. L5 is always the same project. We're showing design costs as well as construction costs. So in year 1 is design, and if there is a construction component, then there's a construction cost. So when we say design, we're referring to planning as well, anything that needs to happen on paper or in preparation or implementation. Construction is hard costs. Across the bottom, that's where we have the total per year, and we're showing anywhere from a few $100,000 to over a couple of million, depending on the year the project would happen. Now, so the numbering that's on the far left orders everything 1 through, in this case, 60. We have not forecasted all 77 projects. There's about 17 of them that we felt it wasn't really fair to forecast because there's too many unknowns, probably land ownership being the biggest one, but there's 60 others that are forecasted out in the sequence. And the last number that's in brackets after the project name is where that project fell within the matrix. So you can read that. You can see that some projects, a project might be number 5 in the sequence, but it was much later in the matrix. And that's because we're advancing and delaying projects based on if there's any efficiencies we're looking for, dependencies. A lot of the planning projects we need to happen up front, so the waterfront wide ones you're going to want to do is up front. So you're going to influence later projects. And there's certain projects too, mostly in the canal land because of land ownership and dealing with the unknowns over land ownership. Many of those projects are delayed past the 10-year mark so that they can use the planning work can happen in advance of so I think you can skip it. So this is my last slide here. So, and for a further sort of explanation of this in the report, page 111, I think is probably the best information to put some people's minds at ease. So, first point though being that this is an important tool for budgeting purposes. We've done this in other projects, and it seems to be quite successful, and it's helpful for councils and staff to figure out where the budget needs to be. It should be considered though viewed as a living document to be updated and adjusted over time. So this is everyone's best guess at this point based on what we've heard. But that doesn't mean something that is later in the sequence, maybe an opportunity comes up for funding. There's a program in place, and you might be able to get the federal government, let's say, to help split some costs. You could advance a project and move it into the sequence, move it up the timeline. Same thing, something might get delayed as because there's unforeseen circumstances. And so the last point there, future councils in consultation with town staff will determine if, when, and how these projects are implemented. Again, on page 111, there's further language in there to help explain the fact that there may be projects in here. There's 77 recommendations. There might be a few that are a little unsure of. But there's every opportunity later in the process following a master plan to revisit those and look at those and make sure that everyone's on the same page. So you don't want to be concerned with a few projects that are maybe in the queue in year 13, year 25, who knows, and be worried that those are reasons not to approve a plan like this. So when it is master plan, there's a lot of work that has to happen after this. More consultation, more design, and of course approving the budget. So with that, any questions?
Well, thank you very much. And other questions? Councillor Glenn Grant?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As he's noticed up there, it's a living document to be updated and adjusted over time, and there's an Angel Park area. I just want to put an amendment on that. We talked about there's an increase activity there. The Cornwall Rowing Club is now established in Angel Park, so it's a living document and updated already. So. Thank you.
Mr. Symington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. First of all, the document looks nice, but I think it's green in spades. There's a lot of items on there that I in all honesty, I couldn't support. But talking dollars, you're talking 25 million over 5 years. Well, if you go through the proposed budgets, pages 117 to 121, it comes up to 24,323. Go to the implementation forecast, pages 123 to 127, it totals 21,955,000. You've got a difference of 2.3 million. Just like to know where the money will, what that money is.
I'd have to look and see what it might just be a need for, I don't know if it's the difference between 60 forecasted projects and the 77 recommended ones. That might be, so we did round off. So
But in the proposed budget, there's some in there that says not forecasted, and there's a $0 figure.
Sure.
I just thought that the two budgets should jive, not be $2.3 million apart.
Yeah. I think it might be the difference between 60 projects forecasted and 77. So, but I'd have to take a closer look and straighten it out.
Another question, I'm not sure who it should be directed to. It's more or less the direction of this plan. If we were to say, yeah, this is great, and we're going to go ahead with it, so we make the recommendation to council, and council would then do what they wish with PAC's recommendation. Then if it was approved by council, then I would suspect that this would be like the official plan of the city, where staff would take this and move forward with it. Like go to this those charts right there, years 1 to 5, they'd start off there. In year 1, they'd put 200,000 in their budget. Year 2, whatever it is, 305, and so on. But looking at this, by year 3, we're already supposedly building the boat launch and the beach improvements, and we don't even own that land. I think OPG would have a lot of problems with doing work on the dike and in that area. So seems like we're putting the cart before the horse, so, what I would really like to see is that if council would put together a plan review committee of laypersons, council, and staff to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and make recommendations back.
Thank you for the suggestion. Should we take that to motion? Is that? I think that
I can think of it.
If you want a motion, I'll make one.
might be early days for that yet. I mean, as you said, this is a huge swath of possibilities that will take years to unfold. I mean, typically, a counselor could make a motion, or city staff at budget time could bring forward a proposal to begin with one of these items.
So,
So, okay, just backing up then, in answer to my question, what are we doing with this document? If we say yes, we like it, it goes to council, council says yes, we approve it, then what, is it just a matter, it's not gonna be a matter, well, I think we'll do this one this year and not this one. There has to be some format, otherwise it's useless.
And I'm sure each one of those items would be debated as they're brought forward. Perhaps the PAC secretary can enlighten us as to
Madam Chair. Yes, you're correct. It is a policy document. It gets its direction from the official plan that directs us to have this document. And as before, I think some of you may be aware that we did have a waterfront committee. That could be a decision of council. But as it stands right now, if PAC is to recommend this to council tonight, then a bylaw will go to council to adopt the plan. So as I said, it's it's a policy document that staff will use staff and perhaps a committee to determine which projects you as a council want to move ahead with.
Ms. Buizo?
I think I have clarification. I wanted to understand that I've read this many times to understand it. It's very complicated to see its levels. But once this is approved, if it gets approved, I guess my concern is how do we go about that? Because we don't own half the land. So that could take forever for us to get the land that we want to implement. So would that throw it into another year and we just pick something else to start with? Or like that's, I guess, what I was just wondering about.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think as Michael has mentioned tonight, there have to be negotiations with the federal government with respect to those lands. And that being said, we therefore would probably move, as you said, to some other project or whatever in the plan. But because it is a living document, maybe 25 years from now we will own it. So I think it's important to have, be cognizant of what we're going to do with that land should we own it. Thank you.
Councilor Hollingsworth?
Just a question, kind of as maybe a follow-up to perhaps Ms. Joyce Smith. Let's pretend, for the sake of argument, council says, yeah, sounds terrific, we approve it, wonderful. And so now we have this document that's been approved by council. And let's pretend that there's a councillor who doesn't want the beach in Gano Park because it's too far to get there for people who walk, and he or she wants the beach right beside the RAF wing. So, that being said, if said councillor decided to make a motion under new business in a couple of meetings' time saying, I want it here instead of here, how does that relate in terms of the fact that the majority of council said, no, this is our waterfront plan? So does that mean that the council of the day says, no, we can't do it at the RAF wing because the council already said they want it at the Gano Park or whatever they decide they want it? How does that work?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think as Michael has also said, it is a living document. It's not, in my understanding, it's not like a zoning bylaw where
Right.
it's the Bible, so to speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure of that,
I
that it's
think-
not quite this, it's not
Yeah,
law.
there would be room for negotiations, and perhaps that's where, as Mr. Symington has put forth, perhaps a secondary group would take
So if
a
a
more cursory review of the document. So
Fair enough. So, for example, if a private sector person said, I want to do this, but I don't want to do it where the waterfront document says, I want to do it someplace else. We're not going to say, well, the document says this is it, so sorry, you're out of luck. Not going to work like that.
Through you, Madam Chair. I think the city PAC is very well aware of the number of waterfront plans that we've had ever since I've been here. And I've been here a long time. Too long, I guess. I don't know. But there's always been a waterfront plan in the planning office. And
Okay.
somebody has always had it on the corner of their desk and pushed for various projects in front of a committee perhaps, or at budget steering
Sure.
times or whatever. So it's the very same thing. It's just as Michael has said, it's updated to reflect, I think, what the public consultation told us.
Okay, good enough. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Mayor?
So I'm particularly pleased that we made a motion to hear from the public, because I'll be curious to listen to those comments. I do want to just comment to the consultant on the harbor piece of the project. You know, you have it outlined as a challenge. So the harbor, and when I say harbor, I mean the joint project with Akwesasne. You have it highlighted as a challenge and not as an opportunity. I don't agree. I think it's both. And I also think we have to be much clearer in that document about the fact that we co-own that, and we can't solely make any decisions there. Even the fact that we're putting up some design is a little presumptuous, because we have not consulted formally with Akwesasne on this. So I would be very careful about this piece, and I think that this is a great opportunity as well as a challenge, and I think we need to spell that out in the document. Thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
Councillor Grant, I know I've seen a hand in the audience, but if you don't mind, I think it's appropriate to hear from PAC first, and then I'll call upon the public. Thank you. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I think there's a few concerns here that aren't really necessary. If you look at the implementation forecast on page 123, the first three is talking about, one is the tourism strategy. We have an official plan which is going to dictate some things. The tourism strategy will help us, help council with trying to understand where's the best bang for our buck from a tourism perspective. But when you look at, there's a land acquisition task force, I think that would be one of the first committees that we put together to, if we don't own the land or we can't purchase it, then that really messes up some of the details here. So I think if we start looking in steps, that was one of the first steps that we should be utilizing. It'll help us determine what's next along with the tourism strategy. So I think these three, the way they have them, maybe number 2 isn't a real priority now, but the number 1 and 3, I think that'll help us give some direction.
Good. And Councillor McIntosh?
I just want to, further discussion where the mayor talked about, I sit on the committee with her as you do, with Akwesasne. Have you just shown Akwesasne with this? Have you had any contact with them?
We introduced ourselves to the project and invited them to it, but they haven't seen this.
They haven't seen that. I share her, not concern, but it's a very touchy thing because we're partners with them, and many times in the previous council, we had councillors stand up and almost indicate that we're running the show when we decide what's going on. It hasn't gone over well on the other side, so, we gotta treat them as partners, and if we have any ideas, we gotta run it past them. It's a 50-50 deal, and that's what it came down.
And Councillor Gardner?
Just something that's missing. I know in your report you talk about the current beach being in the east end or the west end, Gano Park. However, having been part of the triathlon every year, there's a swim which is in the east end where there is no current. They actually, part of the triathlon is swimming. So I think we need to look at that area too, not just Gano Park as a beach and the possibility there. So, excuse me.
Are there any other questions, PAC? Councillor Bergeron?
Yes, are you saying that a beach is the highest priority item according to this?
That's what ended up putting on this morning.
I mean, I don't hear that, so it leads me to challenge a lot of the numbers here. Can you maybe highlight the top 10? Not to put you on the spot, but there's a lot of recommendations in here. I have the top 10, but it's pretty small.
Go back and
The second one is ice skating, which I agree with. Trail enhancements.
slide, 28. Yeah, so top 10, are all, well, the ranking of all of them
Page
is, for
112.
this is based on the matrix, so the scoring of those 10 criteria. And, so this isn't necessarily the order that we suggested to be implemented, but this is the order of the priority that came out of the matrix. So again, we move things around based on other factors. So the top one that came out was beach improvements. Ice skating was number 2, point million number 3, trail enhancements, the fourth one, increased food and cafe opportunities, number 5, signage for wayfinding, number 6, dragon boat rowing and paddling course was 7, campground 8, waterfront trail improvements 9, and pedestrian waterfront interface on Lamoureux Park was top number 10. So again, that's not necessarily what we've set for the forecast where it would be implemented. We'd have to go to the other one to look at where those land. But again, and so in appendix, and one of the last, I think it's the last appendix, shows the scoring that was applied and how those numbers came out.
I saw the scoring. I don't hear a lot about a beach. I've been talking to as many people as I can, so that it shows up first in the priority matrix. I kind of want to review the way we came to those numbers. That priority sequencing where you 20% is weighed, and we had talked about that at the last presentation. Did you look at changing that a little bit, or?
We had some comments on it, but not enough to, like one person would say one thing, somebody will say something else. They'd sort of cancel each other out, so we adjusted.
Yeah, there wasn't a motion for it, but is this in a spreadsheet somewhere that if we did change the priority
Yeah, totally. Well,
percentages,
the
it would
spreadsheet-
just spit it out for us?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's shown in that appendix.
So we'll
we
have access to
We
that?
have these spreadsheets, but it's all there, like the map is obviously behind it, but it's easy to reproduce,
Okay,
check the numbers.
thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Bear?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On that note, could you possibly speak to the other 10 criterias or other 9, because there was 10 criterias, and on Appendix G, we can find them, but maybe for the public, you can speak to those 9 other items and the weight that they carry. So the democracy activity was 20%, but there's another 80% that was allocated. So if you have that appendix with you, if you want to speak to those other 9 items,
Okay.
that would be excellent.
So, yeah, on page, on page 189, I'm just looking at that now. So there's 10 criteria. So the level of community smell is the first one, we call that. And that's 20% of the weighting. Improved access to water, that was given a weighting of 15%. So if the project provided additional opportunities to get to the water, score higher. Contributes to growth in tourism, 10%. Supports health, fitness, and wellness, 10%. Facilitates naturalization of the environment, 10%. Contributes to safety and security, again 10. Anticipated level of use, so if we thought this was something that was going to be used by a lot of people, it would score higher. If it was going to be used by a very small number of people, it would score lower. Enhances the potential for beautification, that was given a score of 5%. Provides multi-season benefit, 5%, and ease of implementation is given 5%. Those were the 10 criteria. Now, I think I mentioned this last time, that there are, we've used a number of different criteria before, depending on the community. So one community in particular I can think of is quite different. They actually weren't interested in tourism, so they were looking at, we called it managed tourism. So instead of promoting tourism, looking how to minimize the impact of tourism. So we had some criteria based on that. We've also had ones criteria that focused on revenue generation. real interest out in something here because we could add it to it. So there's different criteria that could be used. These are the ones that we felt were, based on what we heard from the public, was important, were the criteria that we used.
And follow-up question, was it your team or was there potentially city staff as well involved in weighing these items, deciding whether it was 5% or 2% or each project, right, in every criteria?
Yeah, so we did the initial weighting and then there was discussion with staff.
Okay. I do just have some comments while I have the mic. I really enjoyed reading the report. I know it's a working document and there'll be plenty of opportunities for us to debate and discuss and reprioritize, but I really enjoyed having a little bit of history to each part of our waterfront. I thought that was really great for all of us to read. The pictures, the little mock-ups were helpful, sort of helped us dream a little bit. I do like that priority number 8 within the waterfront as a whole items is, the waterfront wide items is environmental due diligence, so environmental health needs to be considered within all projects. So this is a line that I think is really important within the plan and something that we should certainly be accountable to when we are proceeding with all of these really great ideas. I would really love for the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne to sit down and have the same presentation and have the opportunity to give just as much input, potentially change the plan before we do a final adoption. I think that's critical to the future of our waterfront, having them as engaged as we are. We are partners. I guess my last point is, does anybody know where we can find $25 million?
That's what taxpayers have.
Ms. Lisa, I think your hand was up.
It was, yeah. So I guess I have a comment. My comment is this. So I know that I'm not the only one as I look at my partner next to me here. We've done the math, and the reality is 0.5% of Cornwall's population had a say in this. And I just don't think it's enough. I just want to throw that out there in case somebody didn't do the math. I did the math. I took every single point you had and everybody who had input, and it's 0.5% of Cornwall's population. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Mm-hmm. That's public engagement.
Are there any other comments or questions from PAC? Seeing none, then I'll invite the public to, yes, you may stand and state your name and address, please.
Mark Cabby, 1117 Bedford North. I'm a member of the Great River Network and Cornwall Wonderful. Like you mentioned, different environmental opinions. And gentlemen for all his hard work. But I think it's what Carol said. Any of the projects are coming up to be implemented at public. Be invited to comment. Possibly we could put a little slip into the standard free holder that they can write comments and bring it back if they want. But I have a few comments on the plan. One being about the beaches. There are 3 deposition zones along the waterfront, from Lamu Park to the Grace Street. And they're all legacy pollution from Downtown, CIL, and older industries. There's Myrex, there's PCBs, methyl mercury, dioxins, all kinds of that stuff. It's under the sediment. So if you put a beach in, you dig that out, you're spreading that pollution down the river again. It's affecting fish, it's affecting the public. There's a whole range of adverse effects it will have. And the canal lands, the canal area, would be nice to fix up. But if any of you have gone down for a walk by the 3 bridges at the foot power of that road, you'll see that health and safety is going to be a particular concern because of all of the rotted wood falling in off of it, the stones cracking and falling in. In some places, it's not safe to stand close to the water because the structure is so old. It's the original canal from 1847. You know, so there's a little bit of health and safety there. The other concern is that where are you getting the 25 million?
I think with any plan like this, you need a plan to get the funding. So, you've always had a waterfront plan, this is just an update. And, yes, I don't expect that Cornwall right now could afford to do all those things, but the only way you can, get funding opportunities, usually you don't have a lot of time, right? All of a sudden there's a program, you've got to get your ducks in a row, and so you have this plan to say, pull it together, and then you can get some funding. So, that would be the idea, and of course, these programs change over time.
And that's the point I made about having public awareness and public input to every project, because each one is gonna have its own set of problems or, to overcome in that. So, I think the public, wherever the pages are, that they need to know what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think I mentioned page 111 before, where it talks exactly about that. About every project would come back to the public, would be presented as basically a new project. So nothing gets approved through this plan. It's like it's only step one. The only way you know that it's a project is if you have something like a master plan.
I was impressed that you see a plan for a whole bunch of contributions. I'd be carried out the stretch of it.
Thank you. Mr. Bowler, did you have?
I just, I wanted to, in fairness to the consultant, because the consultant actually did include beach locations and opportunities within, I suppose you might say, on this side of the canal and east of the dam. However, we did become aware of the sediment information in the calendar year during this project, and for that reason, the consultants were informed that all of the locations that were selected were not suitable, and so therefore Gano Park was selected. So I just wanted to make that clear for anyone who had comments about the beach and its location. And yes, we did receive a fair amount of requests from the public for a beach. In fact, that goes back to the days of Chuck Charlebois and talking about a local beach, something that's affordable for the community. And so it's been talked about for all of the years that we've had a waterfront plan. But I just wanted to make that comment.
Yes, Mr. Symington?
Just, thank you, Madam Chair. Just in speaking about the beach, it seems rather obvious that it'd be very difficult to establish a beach in this particular area. But there's a great beach not very far away. Summertime, the Cornwall transit buses are not fully utilized because the schools are closed. Why not have a couple bus runs to Millrush Beach each day? It's a lot cheaper than trucking tons of sand and watch it wash downstream or wherever it's going to go. But, I just can't see why it wouldn't work.
We could probably table that to bring that to Winter Cap's attention at some point. And I guess there have been other contexts too where it's a question of taking a city bus outside the city limits, so I think that's a discussion for another person to respond to. Thank you.
I think the only, if I may, the only other aspect I would point out there is that, and it's pointed out by the consultants a fair number of times, is that everything will need a feasibility study. Not so much a study, but everything will be determined based on whether it's feasible or not. So there will be costs that, and it goes back to the question of what projects and when. All of these, or most of these, will be capital projects that will come before council. So every year we will bring forward, with the input of a waterfront committee, I suspect, various projects. Perhaps as outlined in this report, but again, plus or minus, based on economics, etc. So whether it makes sense to put a beach in at Gano Park, that will be measured and will be evaluated against ideas such as what you proposed.
Just one last word, and I'll be quiet. No, I hate to bring it up, but what I'm a little bit leery about is that if this becomes approved and we have these wonderful projects in here, it could end up like our bicycle master plan, where not being a cyclist, I didn't come out to the public meetings, I wasn't really aware of it. next thing you know, here's Second Street down to 2 lanes from 4 lanes, and congestion in the traffic, I don't have a choice but to use Second Street where I live. So I just hope that we won't, down the road, all of a sudden, boom, we're gonna spend $1.7 million doing a promenade through Gaydon Park by putting down interlock brick and this sort of thing. And instead of saying, well, where did that come from? Well, it's in here, so
Well, I
let's do
think
something
we
about
have
it
to
now.
accept, this is a direction. None of this is proposed as an action item for the immediate time.
Okay.
And as Mr. Boileau says, that the accessibility issues and this provides a direction. That's what we're asked to approve.
It's on the menu.
Any other questions, either from PAC or of the public? Yes.
Stéphane Grondin, 53 Vista Drive, South Stormont. My question is in regards to the canal lands. Has there been a request put forth towards the federal government, or do we know who owns the canal lands? Is it Seaway or OPG? And what time frame?
Perhaps Mr. Boileau would answer that.
We've had communication with Transport Canada, so it's primarily Transport Canada lands, it's St. Lawrence Seaway lands, and around the ball diamonds in the marina is Public Works Canada. But it's largely Transport Canada. We've had communication with them over the last 12 months. There was a presentation made to council from Transport Canada on the surplus lands. So the lands, various lands along the waterfront are surplus. That's been declared, and the next thing that we'll be doing is again meeting with them. We have a meeting set up for about a month from now to talk about those lands again, and trying to get in a position where if the city is the best owner of those lands, getting into conversations about that. Perhaps some lands are best for development, private development. So all of those conversations will start in the next month or so.
But no idea roughly when the land will be transferred or purchased to the city? Still discussing.
I would hope, months after that. That will require some conversations. Of course, we've talked about Akwesasne, the city of Cornwall, and again, maybe, then there are other parties like Ontario Power Generation. So there are some lands that are not suitable for the city to own. It should maybe be left with other organizations. So it's hard for me to answer that question. They've been declared surplus since 2014. But we would hope that, given that we have this plan and that it is really contingent, largely, especially in the canal lands, on owning certain lands, that we will be successful in getting some of that.
Madam Chair.
Council,
I'd like to add to Mr. Boileau's comments and to respond to Mr. Grondin's question. So this meeting that Mr. Boileau was talking about, well, we have organized that so that it's strategic. There's an election coming up, and we have to start having conversations probably now around land ownership. And so the discussion is, how much should we own? What are the strategic pieces? So it's not just getting it all, but also just being strategic about what would benefit the residents of Cornwall. So those discussions started last week, and now Mr. Boileau has arranged for a meeting that's going to take place in September. So we want to be quick about those discussions to make sure that this government and whatever government is elected after the election understands that the Cornwall wants to be present in all of those discussions. Because as Madame Brisson said, we don't own a lot of this stuff. So we have to be very strategic and factor in Akwesasne, the duty to consult that the federal government has. So this is a very big and complicated issue, but it's definitely on our radar. Merci.
and Councillor Gardner, I'm sorry.
I guess in regards to the cost of the project, some of it could also be like the floating islands, floating playground, Whiteboard Park, the kayaks, those could all be run by private sort of businesses or even organizations like Kinsman Optimist Club could be funding those projects, so the cost could be offsets. Third party.
Partnership. And Councillor Gardner?
Just realistically, a lot of these projects are going to depend on the different years and the budgets and what money we have. But at the same time, this council has been really good, and the council previous to this, as preparing reserves for different, I'm not sure how to put this, but we have reserves in place for white water, sewage, we have reserves for everything. As we start identifying projects that we might go ahead with, budgets will determine, senior levels of government will determine what we can do, but we can also start putting reserves away for projects as we go. So it may take a year or two, but we need to start doing that. But realistically, budgets will tell what gets done and what doesn't get done.
Yes, Councillor Bennett?
Just wanted to, one of the comments made was, how we plan on finding $25 million. I think, in my mind, we'd want to be very strategic in our thinking as to what we implement first. And I would go with projects that would be revenue generators. In my mind, and I've been saying it for a couple of years now, a campground at Gatineau Park would be a great revenue generator. And that would be something that if we're generating revenue, that would go into a reserve of some type to fund other recommendations within this plan. So I think we don't necessarily have to keep going back to the tax base. If we pick some of these things that will be generating revenue for us, that's less we need to ask from our taxpayers to pay, and make us a little more self-sufficient.
I see a hand in the back row and then over there.
Kyle Bergeron, City of Cornwall. With this project, and I know there's reasons why I couldn't include it, but there's one glaring hole in it, and I know you can include it, but that is a Domtar property. And to me, that is a key piece of the waterfront going forward, and that should be the number one priority for the city. In order to make money to do these projects, you need to generate revenue, and you need to, I think the city board needs to step it up, buy the property, invest in the cleanup, and, that'll do a lot to hit two of your goals, which is waterfront development and increasing the population of the city. Because right now that is holding our city back. And our fear of investing in something that's going to be generating revenue is going to kick us in the behind down the road. In terms of the plan for one baseball diamond at Benson Center to replace 7, fair trade, destroyed multi-million-dollar facility. Don't even bother. We have a lot of new Canadians in the community. Maybe build a cricket pitch instead to entice Southeast Asians who are moving to this community in droves. Thank you.
And Madam.
Good evening. Carol Lalone, 727 Sydney. I was listening to what you were saying about the expansions and the waterfront. Beautiful pictures. But my question in my head is, you keep talking about the community. Have you looked outside the community to generate the activities? Like, I keep hearing the community, but there's a lot of people that are up in age. It's a, more or less, I hate to say it and I'm part of it, but a senior community. And we've got young kids, and it's a beautiful picture. But have you looked like outside how to generate the activities? Or is it just Cornwall, an area?
Well, one of the first tasks is a tourism strategy. Is that what you're referring to? So you're
I'm
talking
sorry, I can't hear you.
a tourism strategy. Sorry, if you're talking about bringing people in from outside Cornwall, that would be one of the first things to look at. So there's a number of items here that are looked at. Tourism, like maybe track tourism. So we talked about the wakeboard park, rowing, the water activities, they would all encourage people to come to Cornwall.
So you've looked at different plans from outside the city? Like, when I say plans, like you've studied how that tourism is brought into,
Well, we've done other waterfront plans for the community.
okay, not just waterfront, but all the activities you're talking about, like I'm going, you keep talking about generating money in that, and Cornwall, as we all know, isn't the greatest city to generate that kind of money. So my question is, have you looked outside? Like, is it free? Are you gonna charge for everything? Taxes go up to generate the money?
Well, tourism obviously has a spin-off, so if people are attracted to come to Cornwall, any of the number of recommendations would probably improve tourism. They spend money in the community, and that helps to boost the economy in the city. So I mean, we don't do just waterfront plans. We look at all kinds of different master plans and improvements.
Well, basically, that's what I'm asking, but is it just a study of Cornwall and surrounding
No,
areas?
this plan is just for Cornwall.
I beg your pardon?
This plan is just for Cornwall, so we're not making recommendations beyond Cornwall.
Okay. 25 million in 25 years? It's a lot of money.
Hi, Kelly Bergeron, 107 Race Street. So just to address this young lady here.
Oh, thank you.
Actually, one of the ideas that I brought forward was her money-making venture, and it was based off of something like the Nordique Spa, where people go up and spend $80 to $100 a piece to go and use the spa out there. I looked at the revenue that they generate every year. It's at least $25 million. They have countless amounts of visitors. If you were to bring something like that to Cornwall, you can make it affordable. You could have senior days. You could create a money-making venture. So I just wanted to use that as an example. I also just wanted to commend everyone who's been kind of doing this project. I think it's a wonderful vision. I've lived in Toronto. I've seen what they've done with the Bentley there. I think that, if everyone just kind of chips in and gives their 2 cents, it's great. But I can see finding the capital to make this happen. So, thank you.
Other questions of the report, possibly? Yes,
I listened to
Former Councillor.
one comment from the audience regarding where the ball diamonds and so forth. In looking at the document, I don't have it in front of me. There are no significant changes to where the diamonds are now. Is that not correct?
That's correct, yeah. No, so we're suggesting that maybe part of the Parks and Rec plan that has to happen, that you could look at in something with the Benson Center long term. But there are no immediate recommendations to move ball diamonds or ball play on the water.
So there are no recommendations in the document, which is part of the plan.
Well, it's a long term, it's not forecasted as a timeline. It's a suggestion to look at it long term, as everything here is. So we did hear that there's concern about that, but we think that it's important to at least consider it for the future, long term, whether that's 25 years from now.
But there is no political will to change that right now, and I don't think there will be in the future.
And that's fine, and that could go for half the things in this plan. It doesn't mean you don't have a plan long term. It just means that you have part of what our job was is to look at what the community was telling us. None of these ideas came from us really. They all came from somewhere, maybe from another community, maybe from the community here. But they're all ideas that we've heard and we've sort of reported back, and we've done our best to frame it so it fits within Cornwall. Of course, the community's had a few opportunities to comment on it. So there are things we've heard negative things on, but we've also heard positive. We had heard negative things about all negative about certain recommendations. We recently got rid of it because it doesn't serve the plan any good. But so everything here, I can honestly say we've heard support for from a certain group and enough people to make it worthwhile to keep. Does this mean that it's a lower down the priority list? We need to revisit at the 10-year review.
Larry?
Hi there. Jordan Wheeler, Cornwall.
So this is a great policy, and if council accepts it, that's really good as well. I've heard a lot that there's been a policy for a really long time. Development team, tourism team, that staff that's meeting with the federal government. I think if this is accepted, all of those departments need to go full force, get the land, tourism, get economic development, doing something, and then turn the plan into a reality, rather than just getting another plan in 5 years, another plan in 10 years, another plan in 15. So let's get the departments moving.
Thank you.
Paul St. Owens for Stratford South Stormont. The previous owner of Mocktails that was in the park for the last 7 years, and who pulled the plug this year. I'm enjoying my summer. Vested for 7 years in trying to create things. There should have been a sub-budget for the city of Cornwall, which is Mocktails, and trying to submit and create things in the park for activities and events. And one thing now, I don't have a vested interest in anything I say, is please remember there's still work to do within that park. And there's still lighting needing to be improved upon in that park. There's still all kinds of people that use Lemmeter Park, and unfortunately an unsafe environment due to lighting. We were fortunate with Canada 150 that we were able to put lighting throughout the park, which was beautiful for a full year, which lit the park. But unfortunately now it is not lit, and at night if you walk through it, it is completely and totally dark and unsafe, and people are using it, and there are things that are occurring in the park that could be removed or at least observed or at least monitored better if we encouraged people to go down to the park. So, please don't forget that. And I would be happy, because this is not the place to do it, to sit down at one point and talk about the things that don't work in the park and that are needed to be done to improve the environment. Point number 5 is increasing restaurants and food facilities and that kind of stuff. We tried that. We did it, and we invested a lot of money in just trying to create things to bring people to the parks and enjoy it. And it's unfortunate that, after 7 years, decided that it could no longer afford to continue to do things in the park without the support, and that if you look in 7 years of budgets, there's never been a request for a penny from the city of Cornwall to do anything that was related to mocktails and improvements or anything along those lines. So again, now that I don't have a vested interest, please do not remember we have a jewel, something that can be used, and it is used, and the Rib Fest over the week was an excellent example of how good it can be used, but there is still a lot of work needing to be done with the existing facilities. And the only reason why I'm commenting about Lemmeter Park is because I lived there for 7 years, okay? From the month of May till the end of September, which we even did things over the winter to try to bring people to the park. And I saw things such as, using the hill for tobogganing, and there's people that sat on that committee to make that happen. And it works. It does work, and it brings people to certain places. But please, and as council, please, and as a committee, please remember that there's a ton of people out there that want to use it, that are prepared to use it, and have been using it, but they're not doing it in an environment that an investment on your part needs to occur, because there haven't been improvements regarding lighting, which has been for 7 years have been indicating it needs to occur. And there's a page in there where my comments come up. So, and I didn't realize it'd come up to that point, but it gives a little bit of the history about that. And there's so many of you that did come out and see the things that were going on there, and I appreciate that, but we need to continue that, okay? And you lost one of the players.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Senator?
I'm speaking again.
Hey.
Just a quick comment to this gentleman's remark about the past reports. In this plan, it does refer to the 1989 and the 2007 report, and there are quite a number of projects from those reports that are checked off as being completed. So it wasn't just a report that was obtained and put on the shelf. The past reports, there was quite a bit of activity that was carried out through them.
Thank you. We do have other items on the agenda. So are there final comments from the public regarding the report? Are there any more questions from the public regarding the report? Speak up from the sign if there are other questions from the public. Seeing none, then I'll entertain a motion from PAC about the report. Recommendations,
So
Madam Mayor?
we should move it to city council, right? To council agenda? Should that be the motion?
Should there be a recommendation here to approve it and then
Recommend to move it to council. That's what I move.
But will council not want a recommendation of approval or disapproval from the Okay. Recommendation to council then? Councillor Bennett? And
I'll second her motion.
Yep. And Madam Mayor, all in favor?
Question,
Thank you.
by this resolution, are we in essence approving this?
You're recommending it to council.
So if we don't agree with it, we
Vote against it.
vote against it. Okay.
So the recommendation is to move it to a council agenda. We're moving it to council, right? And there'll be further, that's where, yeah, there'll be a bylaw.
And there was a majority vote, so that's how it's going to go to council.
Can I ask one last question of the consultant? So in terms of any further consultation, how would that work, or what do you suggest around that? Because we've heard that the consultation was limited. It's not that it wasn't done, but we don't access everyone through this process, so what do we do?
Well, let me just say one thing, that in terms of comparing other communities, the input on this project was pretty good. There's a lot of communities where almost nobody comes out to public meetings, feedback on that sort of thing. So, when you look at the percentage, yes, it's low, but you always do it that way, you're always going to get a low number. You're not going to get thousands of people. So that's difficult. In terms of how to reach
more
people, I guess you could just post it online for a period of time and pump it up that way. I guess I'm biased because if anything includes me, then I'm giving you some recommendations behind me. I think the challenge public meetings are that only certain people come out to public meetings. So I think the best opportunity is to somehow get it out there to where people aren't expecting it when they see it. So we have to promote it that way.
Thank you.
So I think we can move on then to the next item.
Public hearing items. We have 2 public hearing items tonight to review. Notice did appear in the Saturday, July 6th edition of the Standard Freeholder. The first one is going to concern the draft plan amendment for the Bellwood subdivision.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Still get some interesting reactions. Conclusion. Doesn't understand it. We don't own that property. It's owned by a property. We own legally resented it.
Okay, so a notice was sent out to a 400-foot radius for this application. So Lindsay Parisian is going to present tonight. The subdivision is for the Bellwood Ridge subdivision, located at the east corner of Pitt and Tollgate Road. So Lindsay? For a moment, technical.
Good evening,
Madam Chair, PAC members, fellow staff, and members of the public. My name is Lindsay, and I'll be giving a brief presentation on the Bellwood Ridge development for a proposed draft plan of subdivision. So looking at the subject lands and proposal, just to give you a brief history on where this subdivision dates back. It dates back to 1996, where it was initially known as the Maple Grove draft plan. Since then, this area has undergone several phases of development, which brings us to 2011, which the subject lands actually previously received draft plan of approval. However, due to changes made by the developer, which I'll speak to later in this presentation, today's draft plan is looking at proposing the continuation of this development for phases 4 and 5, as well as remaining lands. So the site is located just south of Tollgate Road and east of Pitt Street for a total area of about 57 acres. Under the official plan, it's designated as urban residential, and it is zoned residential 20. What you see here is an aerial view of the subject lands. And what you'll see is the existing neighborhood, I guess, kind of to the north and to the west. Directly to the east, you see a vacant land, large parcel of vacant land as well. To the west, along Pitt Street, there's some commercial and retail development. And towards the south, along the property line, is actually where CN Rail is. So the next few slides are just some photos of the surrounding area, just to give you some more context of where the site is located. So these two photos are on Tollgate Road. To the left, you'll see that's me standing at the corner of Tollgate and Pitt, looking east. The image on the right is Tollgate Road again, looking west, and actually from that position directly across the street is where you would find Blessed Sacrament Parish. These two photos are Pitt Street. To the left, it's your view looking north, where you'll see that commercial and retail development on the west side, and the image to the right is Pitt Street again, but looking south. These images are of the CN Railway tracks, which border the southern part of the site itself. In the middle, where you see the vegetation and the vacant land, that's actually where the new development is proposing to take place. These two images are of the existing neighborhood that's already been developed. And which brings us to today, to our draft plan of subdivision. Now what I'm going to do is highlight some key points from the report regarding this proposed draft plan of subdivision. So as mentioned, the draft plan of subdivision approval was previously received in 2011. And due to some changes to accommodate for the addition of lands to the east, change in road configuration, as well as new lot fabric to allow more semi-detached dwelling lots has been made, which is why we are here today in terms of the amended draft plan from 2011. And with this proposal, we're actually focusing on phases 4 and 5, as well as the remaining lands, which you would have seen on the previous slide with the draft plan of subdivision. So looking at the entire development, they're proposing a total of 184 units, which comprises of 29 single lots and 155 semi-detached lots. And they are to be developed through a series of phases, beginning, as I mentioned, phase 4 and 5, as they have been identified as a priority, followed by the remaining lands, which will be developed at a later time. Adequate servicing is available to develop these lots. This here, you'll see phase 4 is highlighted in red. They're proposing a mix of single lots, small singles, as well as semi-detached lots, and I believe it's a total of 39 units that will be completed, will be developed once this phase is completed. This here is showing phase 5 with the same mix of lots, singles, small singles, and semis. But this area will have 41 units once it's completed. And just for you to see. The remaining lots, development lands, will have the remaining 104 lots. So looking at the draft plan of conditions for this application, as part of a typical plan of subdivision review process, various external agencies as well as city departments were circulated to review the application, and they provided their comments and draft conditions. Some of them included a stormwater management report, a traffic impact study, a preliminary servicing report, are just some of the few. Additional comments and conditions were provided by various external agencies and commenting departments as well, and those details can be found in Appendix A of the PAC report. And just as a note, CN Rail was actually provided the most updated noise and vibration study. However, they outsourced it to a third party for review and have the comment that those comments would not be received until mid-August. So, as a review of the application for draft plan, we are looking for approval for a subdivision. No changes to the official plan or zoning needs to be made. The residential development being proposed is consistent with the existing neighborhood. As I mentioned, phases 4 and 5 will commence first, as they are priority, followed by the remaining land, which will be developed as a future phase. Parkland dedication will be provided as Block 146 in the draft plan. And I do want to note that a portion of Block 146 is to be developed with Phase 4 and 5. And as of today, the planning division has not received any negative reactions to the mail out of the subdivision, but I do want to make a note that I did receive one inquiry from a neighboring property owner, but the inquiry was regarding road access off of Tollgate Road and whether or not there would be one. And staff had indicated that yes, a road access is being proposed off of Tollgate, and it will be developed in Phase 4. Sorry, just a quick summary. As a quick summary, the planning division has reviewed the proposed plan. It is consistent with provincial policy statement, ROP policies and zoning, consistent with the existing neighborhood. This development offers new housing stock in the area, and the reason for the proposed mix is actually a direct response from market demand increase. And we are supportive, planning is supportive of the application, and we do recommend that it is approved for development.
Thank you. Are there questions of PAC? Councillor Bennett?
I can't remember off the top of my head, is there an existing sound barrier on that side of the tracks for the subdivision that's currently there? Is there one there? I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, and just the other question I had is I know you haven't heard any feedback from the residents. Have we actually sent them information that this is happening? Because I think if we're going to 470 attached over single, that's a heck of an increase in traffic. So are they aware of these plans?
Yes, Madam Chair, through you, we did do our public mail out. I believe it was earlier in June that we had sent out to the neighborhoods.
Okay.
400-foot radius, they all received the public notice about this application.
I had the same question Todd had about the berm, but houses that are built in these areas, the proximity to a CN main line, are there any conditions when you build a house that you have to have supply air, central air, and that sort of thing? A builder told me that when they build near the tracks, there are more restrictions.
Chair, through yes, their conditions are detailed in the draft plan conditions as well, but yes, they are.
Yeah. Okay. Of course, the complaints won't come in until people move in and they hear the train.
And was your hand up, Madam Mayor?
Yes, it was. Just a reminder of the difference between a single lot and a small single lot. I know that these subdivisions always have a lot of semi-detached, because that seems to be quite popular in Cornwall, but what's the difference between a single and a small single?
Madam Chair, through you, so from my understanding is that small single lots, there's a slightly smaller frontage. It's not as wide as a typical single lot. And there are certain conditions in which the builder has to comply with in terms of the types of homes that they build. For example, it has to have an attached garage. Is some certain conditions like that is what the lots what we allow for them to build.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a blanket zoning essentially, res 25% of any one phase can be small lots. And I think it's a 25-foot
Yes.
Frontage, carport's required, and so essentially that, it puts a mix into the subdivision. And I just wanna say too, I spoke with, Mr. Mitchell, who's in the audience tonight, Travis, and essentially, they're reacting to market demand right now for the semi-detached, but PAC will recall that we can use that section under the act for minor amendments. It wouldn't be a full amendment if they find that they wanna put singles in or whatever, because you recall, we did protect that road network right the last, in 2011, so, I think we understand they need the semis right now, that's what they're being told, so that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, and Ms. Rizzo?
I promise I'm usually a really positive, happy person, so don't take this. But I love the plan. I'm a real estate agent, so I know a lot about this. I saw the plan. It's a great plan. I just had a question. The parkland that you have segregated for this type of a subdivision, is there some sort of, and I don't know who to ask, so I'll just let you, Madam Chair, do this for me, but is there some sort of ratio that we have to how big the park should be, or how many parks there should be in this type of subdivision?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's in the act, so it's 5% of any developed area. Essentially, the developer has provided a bike path along that berm, so there were previous discussions with that. The reason for this park is that their subdivision on the other side has a companion block. So that being said, we would have a centralized, like Riverdale, so to speak, a centralized park. That's why Block 146 is being developed at this point. And it'll have, I believe, what is it, Lindsay, three states? Actually, 4 if they do the other side. It's a perfect park.
Okay. I just, when you look at it on a scale like this, when you look at this plan, it seems very minute for the amount of people going to be living there.
It works well. It's great. Don't worry.
Perfect.
Thank you, and Mr. Semmington?
Just a question having to do with in the section under parkland, it said that the berm is not recognized as neighborhood park space, but it says in accepting, the city will be accepting the responsibility for maintenance of this area. Now, normally, I would assume you're talking about the actual park that they're gonna be maintaining, but what about the berm? Who's going to be maintaining that?
Through you, Madam Chair. We've been working with Jamie Fothrop on this, and I believe it's the developer that is responsible for the berm, but the park is managed by the recreation department. So they put the swing set up or whatever it is.
Now, I can see the park itself, but at the berm, I'm just curious how that was handled. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Cowdell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had the same question as Ms. Priso regarding the parkland, because it did seem small, but then I wondered if there would be another path, so I'm happy to see that. I did have a question. This part of the, these phases, are they subject to development charges? Yes, they are? Okay. Thank you.
And, no questions of PAC? Seeing none, Councilor Gardner?
The question, or the comment was about development charges. The province has just made some changes. How is that going to affect?
Madam Chair, that the regulations are put forth and the discussion is open until the 21st of August. So at this point in time, I believe Ms. Bailey has received information from Watson, our consultant within our zoning charges. And eventually what will have to happen is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing will have to provide the planning departments and the finance departments with guidance such that we will probably have to hire a consultant to do a community benefits bylaw, which will replace the parkland bylaw and address the development charges.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, would the proponents like to make any comments? And, Would anybody from the public wish to ask a question or express a comment? Would any member of the public like to ask a question?
Three times.
Seeing not,
Heard that
then
song before.
we'll have a motion on this one. Councillor Gardner makes
Accept the
motion,
recommendation.
accept this, and seconded by Councillor Bear. All in favor? Thank you. And the second item?
Okay, the second item also had a public notice on July sixth with a 400-foot mail-out notice. It's for the Miller Hughes car dealership. The application, PAC Council will remember we needed a resolution because this is our first official plan amendment to our new official plan. So we have an amendment to the official plan to business district, and we have a zoning change to COM 12, and Mr. Doyle will proceed.
Madam Chair, PAC. Tonight we have an application for a Tonight we have an application for an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for lands located at 780 Sydney Street. As Mary indicated, this is our first zoning bylaw amendment application since we adopted our official plan in April of 2018. So essentially the proposal tonight that you will be looking at is to introduce a low-intensity commercial parking lot along the south limit of the Wesleyan Church development site, approximately 1 acre in size. The overall parcel is approximately a little over 3 acres in size. It's located in front Sydney and 8th Street. As you know, the majority of the parcel is currently vacant and underutilized. The church and the associated parking currently occupies just about under 45% of the development site. With the existing designation and zoning, it's part of the planning analysis and planning evaluation. We're always going to take a look at the existing zoning and designation. And as it stands right now, the site can readily be developed or redeveloped to accommodate a use that's permitted in the institutional zone. So, for example, a large majority of the site can accommodate large scale residential, a community center, a private club, clinics, institutions, schools, and so on and so forth. So the parcel is located on the fringe area of the business district. It's in close proximity to commercial and residential land uses, hence why it's so attractive for the proponent to acquire the parcel to amalgamate into its overall development located along Pitt Street. Planning staff has prepared an alternate disposal for PAC members to consider. The current and alternate plan is being proposed resulting in public commentary and commentary received from city departments. So here's the subject site. As indicated, it fronts both Sydney Street to the east, 8th Street to the north, 7th Street to the south, and Pitt Street to the west. Mr. Maloney's Miller Hughes Ford is located right here. Next. So here's an overview of the existing designations and zoning. So pink denotes the business district, and the yellow is urban residential. So the proposal is to acquire this 0.98 or just under 1 acre parcel land and amalgamate it with Miller Hughes directly to the west, totaling approximately 2 acres, just a little bit. So here's an aerial of the existing conditions of the site and proposed parking. So directly to the south, you see you have low-intensive residential land uses. They all front 7th Street except for one property at 712 Sydney Street, which fronts Sydney. As you see here, the proposal is to bisect the parcel, essentially cutting into the existing parking lot that accommodates the Wesleyan Church. So we're just going to get into the alternate proposal that we came up with, and it's not because we came up with the proposal because of some of the concerns received by some of the landowners. And we felt that, we always try to look or think outside of the box and look at different strategies to address and appease some of these concerns. So what we came up with was eliminating the access off of Sydney and moving it a little bit further to the north. You're still achieving approximately 0.89 acres, so it's 0.09 acres less than the original proposed. Approximately 80,900 square feet less than what's proposed. So the intent is to have internalized access to the parking area to be used by Miller Hughes. And again, this parking area will solely be used for inventory, vehicle inventory for Miller Hughes. So the same access will be used. There will be less direct impact to the budding land owner directly to South Front and Sydney Street. This lot spans approximately 55 feet in depth from Sydney Street going towards the west. We're still going to require a tremendous amount of screening, fence vegetative elements along the south and the east limit. I mean, there's a little bit more of a buffer for this parcel right here. They do have a laneway that cuts across two of the other residential lots facing South Street as well. So it serves as an additional buffer. Next, please. So if the request is approved, as indicated earlier, a consent application will ensue. Essentially, the land will be conveyed to 711 Fifth Street, starting to the west. Currently, the institutional site has ample parking to accommodate the Wesleyan Church, both along H Street and along Sydney Street. They will be subject to a site plan approval process as well. Originally, the school, or the former school site, and now the church, was subject to site plan approval, I believe it was about 15 to 20 years ago. So as a result of bisecting those lands and the existing parking lot along Sydney Street, they will also be responsible to apply for a site plan approval application in order to properly delineate the parking along Sydney Street and to address other servicing needs. So the subject development proposal will require a site plan approval process, and we want to address, and we will require them to prepare a functional accessibility and vehicular configuration of the site. We'll want to include stringent vegetation and physical buffering, especially along the southerly limit. Non-reflective directional lighting will be introduced on site. Site servicing, which includes grading and stormwater management, will be applied. So we have received concerns from abutting landowners, one directly to the south and across the street to the east along Sydney Street. A lot of their concerns have been discussed. Planning staff have met with them at our office to thoroughly go over what's being proposed. Following our meeting, it did appear that they were content with what was being proposed. So here's the application prepared by Stantec, the consultant for the proponent. So this is what they're proposing. So you will have a parking lot that will outlet essentially a through lot along Sydney Street, and it will there will be an internalized access right along this boundary right here. Now the proponent is cognizant of potential land use conflicts, and the consultant as well. And just to put things into perspective, during the site plan process, the technical requirements for a buffer along a common property line is typically 1 meter. So that's 3 feet. So the proponent is cognizant of potential land use conflicts. He is proposing to introduce a 4-meter buffer from the common property line, introduce a screening fence, and introduce vegetation elements consisting of hopefully coniferous vegetation, and this will be, discussed more formally during the site plan approval process. So, I mean, they're really trying to mitigate any concerns from any proponents that may have concerns in respects to noise, lighting, disturbance of their private amenity space, both along Sydney Street and the properties facing 7th Street East. Here's an elevation that's prepared by Stantec Consulting. So for instance, this would be the physical barrier or the fence, the vegetative elements, and a 4-meter span. So 12 feet, 12 foot distance opposed to a 3-foot distance. So planning staff is conditionally supportive of the request, both the initial request and the alternate proposal, following design criteria and conditions are introduced as part of the site plan approval process. We suggest that the proposed parking area is solely used for vehicle inventory and storage. The area cannot be used for tire storage. No accessory structures are to be permitted on the land, including and not limited to sheds, trailers, transport truck trailers, marine containers, garbage receptacles. Vehicle delivery is to remain status quo off of Pitt Street. This has been discussed with Mr. Maloney, and he is in accordance with that. Property cannot be used as a through lot and should only allow vehicle access when moving inventory. I mean, this is just a suggestion. And no heavy vehicle access from that property, so service deliveries, it all has to come off Pitt Street. So, I mean, our intent here is to try to soften any impacts to the existing residential systems. So, here's a picture of the westerly development. So, that's the church and the parking lot on Sydney Street. As you can see, it is underutilized lands. It is a greenfield. This is the parking lot fronting Sydney Street. Bisected approximately here. The tree should maintain during construction if approved. Just go back to sorry. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the existing vegetation along the south. There is a tree, a big tree actually, located along the common property line between 712 Sydney Street and the church site. It is dead. It will be taken down by the low intensive residential land uses on the east limit. This is the property located fronting Sydney Street at 712 Sydney, which his backyard spans approximately 55 feet towards the west. This is looking north to more commercial land uses, less intensive residential land uses to the south. This is looking along 7th Street, both to the west and to the east. And this is the Ford Military's development located on Pitt Street. So
Madam Chair? No.
Just I can wait till he's done. It's okay. Say what you got to say, and then I'll ask a question.
So this is the area where the access to the parking lot will be located behind the structure. The structure will be removed from the property. Okay. So we are conditionally supportive of the proposed OP amendment and zoning bylaw amendment as they do adhere to the provincial policy statement and the city's official plan policies. We want the introduction of conditions and application of stringent design standards during the site plan approval process of both options. Also, regulatory controls will be included in the site plan.
Forgive me, I'm not sure if I'm completely crystal clear on it. What exactly are you recommending? The little square box here that you pitched to us tonight, or the bigger one that fronts onto Sydney Street?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Both
proposals.
Help me out here, man. I mean,
both proposals are fine as long as there's conditions attached.
Okay.
Okay, so the purpose of introducing an alternate proposal was initially we received a lot of complaints complaints, not a lot, sorry. We received concerns from abutting landowners.
Okay.
Okay, so we thought that it would be prudent to propose an alternate design, okay, that would lessen the impact to the property owners to the south.
Okay. Now, is Mr. Maloney cognizant of the new version that you have here?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, also.
And does he have a preference as to which one? I think I know. what his
Absolutely,
preference
he
would be.
prepares his initial application.
So the initial application, now, that being said,
Yeah.
he's aware of both, fair enough. Which one would planning prefer us to adopt? The alternate version or the original, or do you like, well, let PAC figure it out?
We like both.
Either or.
We like
Okay.
either or. It
We
all
have an
depends.
alternate, but either or is fine, and the proponent would prefer the bigger version. Does that make sense? Have I got this right?
I mean, it's gonna be based on public input.
Okay, well, I'll wait to hear what my colleagues have to say then, because I'm still not painfully clear, but maybe it'll come to me in a moment, epiphany of some point.
Same question to the rent.
And
Think I
Councillor
like-
Gardner.
I had the same question, but I have another question. Dealing with, obviously he's going to be storing cars there, and there'll be lighting. Is the lighting directional so that it doesn't impose on the,
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it would be not reflected.
and the other thing is a comment, I often go to shop in one of our councillors' stores, and it would be, and I was glad to see they were still coming down Pitt Street, because it would be a nightmare to have them cut down to 7th and then out to Sydney Street, because 7th is so narrow. So I was glad to see that that's remaining the same, that the deliveries would be done on Pitt Street. Just a comment.
Councillor Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask what the residents preferred, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to hear from them very shortly. Okay, great.
And Ms. Brison.
Hi there. So, after seeing this, I saw all your restrictions. Like when I was reading this, I was like, oh wow, they don't want it to be used for people to drive through. They don't want trucks through it. Who's going to regulate that? How are we going to be able to make sure that they're following what they say? So I'm not going to lie. I think Plan B takes care of a lot of those things. By going with your secondary Plan B, it's going to allow that to be off the table. We're not going to have to worry anymore about, okay, getting complaints from neighbors. Okay, he's been moving 20 cars today out that Sydney Street, or so on and so far. So for me personally, I just think that Plan B was a great option for you to put forward for us.
Councillor McIntosh.
Oh, well, I was just wondering, I see the Reverend Larry Blakey says, as of June 24th, nobody had any more concerns in his letter, and we're talking about either or.
Through you, Madam Chair, that letter was dated, I believe, last year.
It says 2019.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the most recent one, sorry. So, no, it was just the first option.
And that, weight
Yeah.
toxics settled.
It was submitted with the applications.
I'm glad this isn't a shopping center. You'd have a 900-page report. Very thorough, Carl.
And that's it for Councillor Bergeron.
So I had the same question as Ms. Brisson, which was answered, thank you. I guess my question is, PAC now, we have to decide which motion we're gonna put forward after we hear from the public?
Yes, we'll hear from the public, we'll hear from the proponents possibly, we'll hear from the neighbors.
Okay.
Who all was in that is, but it isn't, yeah. Mr. Singleton?
Just one question, Madam Chair. The property to the south, the fronts on Sydney Street, the objections there, was it to the access to the Sydney, or the fact that there was going to be cars parked up against the abutting fence? Because I was just thinking, if it was because he didn't want a whole mess of cars parked behind his house, go with option B with a laneway going to Sydney.
Through you, Madam Chair, the nature of the concern and you want to raise in the audience this evening, he was concerned with the loss of the green space with the noise, potential noise, service delivery, heavy transport coming off of Sydney Street, well toward
If there are no more questions from PAC, then I invite the opponents to speak. Identify yourself, please, and
Hello, Madam Chair. My name is Eric Bays. I'm a planner with Stantec. I'm here today with Sean Maloney as well as Scarlett Miller. I just had kind of a couple add-ons and some additional information. So, do you want me to?
Yeah.
No pressure.
I was already feeling it, so now I can hide behind the
I
lectern.
don't even know we're voting on yet, so that'll be.
Yeah, so as my colleague, as my colleague here had mentioned, Sean's preference is to have the original proposal that does extend over to Sydney Street, and it is because it provides an additional kind of, I guess you could say, a relief valve for those who are using the property to provide access for those who are leaving and traveling north to go home, as opposed to people turning left onto Pitt, going down along 7th, and then turning left again to get to Sydney, and the option of passing through the site and then leaving right at Sydney as well. Regarding the kind of impact of the property on the adjacent landowners, I mean, generally, as Carl mentioned, there is the requirement usually for about a 1 meter setback from the property line. We are proposing that additional 4 meters. And I believe that a lot of the concerns related to the impact of this use on adjacent properties can be addressed through the site plan process. So there are questions related to the direction of the lighting, what type of fencing might be provided, what type of vegetation could actually be provided in order to screen views. I think all of those things can be really addressed through the subsequent site plan process that this proposal would be required to go through. The other reason why I would have preference towards through design is because it provides the church with a more functional lot. It keeps it square, which allows it kind of more flexibility in the future, depending on you know how they want to end up using the site into the future. The only other point I think I'd like to add, you know. Actually, that pretty much covers, but I'm also here. I'm happy to answer anyone's questions.
yes, Councillor Hollingford?
Okay, so if I get it right, if we went with the alternative, the planning alternative, you're saying that, forgive me if I'm not getting this, but that essentially there'd be a square left over that kind of, as it sets up, would no longer be as usable? Does that make sense to the church? So they'd be stuck with this little small chunk of green space,
I mean,
and not really knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for option B, can you do something with kind of that L-shaped parcel that the church is left with?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a design solution for kind of everything, or at least that's my belief. I'm biased because I'm a planner, so. But you know, it generally, if you have an institutional use, it's more preferable to have it in some type of complete square or rectangle, just because, you know, you have more flexibility and how you can expand.
Can I just add a little bit just on this? I'm Pastor Lloyd Blakey, Western Church. When we were proposing on selling a piece of land, if you go back to the other diagram, part of this proposal, and what you don't see, nobody's ever seen, but I've done my homework, and we've got enough room to put a 300-seat sanctuary kind of in the back left-hand corner of the ground with the appropriate green space. And I know you've never seen it, but I've talked to Carl and I've talked to people that can give me the amount of parking that was required. The other proposal doesn't allow me to do that. And so the proposal just came just recently, you understand. So this allowing him to take that much land is a very intentional amount of land that left us with and in fact, I can't even sell the other land the way you described it without my entire district approving it. It doesn't happen quite as simple as what you might think. It's a denomination, they own the property, and I have to abide. And the very first question would be, what's going to be the impact on the future building? And the answer will be, it's not going to fit. So I just want to throw that out there. I know Carl is not aware of that, and that's just, like I said, those are plans we have, dreams we have. Everyone's got dreams, right? So that will have a negative impact. And in fact, I'm not even willing to sell the land with Plan B.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
And Councillor Bergeron, I believe, is next, and then Councillor Grant.
You said the preferred one is Plan A. Sounds like it's now the only one. But you also said they wanted to, because they wanted to use it as a throughway. One of the rules in here is that you can't use it as a throughway.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's something that it's just like, well, it's, you know, we're going, we need to go obviously through the site plan process to work out those nuances. It is a preference that this option A allows. Again, through the site plan process, we might have to respectfully argue a little bit more and make sure that if there are certain concerns that that need to be addressed through the site plan process to make sure that we're minimizing a potential impact on adjacent owners, on the transportation system, we're happy to do that. Now we are proposing that access out onto Sydney. Sean and I have talked, and we've talked with staff as well. We're not proposing to try and load trucks there is currently not permitted, and we're not proposing to encourage any changes like that.
So, sorry.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, so today we're not voting on whether or not you can use it as a throughway or not, correct, Carl? We're just saying, this is the one we like, and then you have to come back with, it goes through another process.
Through you, Madam Chair. That's correct. I mean, during the site plan process, we're going to enter into discussions with Paul. So if there's an impasse, okay, the only mechanism is to bring the site plan back to PAC to have this discussion.
And so follow up to that, I suppose, how would you enforce this if it was approved in theory?
Part of the site plan approval process, we have a legal binding agreement that the phone has to enter into. Okay, so we do hold securities, and we do have ways of enforcement measures of achieving what we want. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to rely on the public. We have to rely on the abutting landowners to contact the city and tell them that, yes, we have concerns because of this is happening, this is happening. So in that instance, we would talk with Mr. Maloney and say, you know, kindly, you know, we'd like to remind you of your site plan agreement and the conditions that are contained within that plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I'm correct on the Sydney Street, the site plan approval at that time, is it going to be an exit and entrance off Sydney?
It's designed right now to accommodate, so it's one-way Sydney.
From
So
Sydney.
I'm assuming that, yes, they would be able to go like that.
Both ways. The thing I'm concerned about for the neighbors, and I'm getting more and more calls on noise. So I'm thinking about the residents that are there and the potential noise. I support the plan because I support business development, and I think it's a good for Miller Hughes to get this extra land. But we have to think about the residents too and potential noise. Now, I don't know if you take that into consideration.
Absolutely, through you, Madam Chair. I mean, there's a couple of ways to tackle that item. If the parking lot's going to be used solely for inventory, vehicle inventory. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Maloney. So, 98% of the time, inventory is going to be placed in designated parking spots.
Yeah, currently we hold most of our inventory across the street on Pitt Street. So that forces us to cross Pitt, which is a much busier road with customers back and forth. We've doing it for 60 years. It's not comfortable. And allow most of our inventory to be displayed on the same sort of lot as our offices and meeting rooms. Take advantage to our customers.
And I mean, also, vehicle delivery is varied times, Sean? Or?
Vehicle deliveries from transports are usually during business hours. They are not, they don't drop off very often after hours, only because we have to sign off for something. So they're reluctant, it's their insurance, so they don't, they only, for the most part, will deliver 95% of during business
So,
hours.
with that being said, it's safe to say that any moving of the inventory is going to be conducted during business hours, and it won't be done in the early mornings or in the late evenings to
In this particular area.
That's correct. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more persons from PAC and perhaps the general public? Let's do some neighbors.
Well, there's a lot of, hi, Linda Brunel, you want to say, yes. So there's a lot about this that concerns me. One, the only people I really see being affected here is the neighbors, because we live there 24 hours, 7 days a week. We're not buying the car where we have to be accommodated for 3 hours to sign the contract. We're not just showing up for church or service. We're there 24/7. And a throwaway, that's going to be problematic. I've been there for 33 years, and you see it at Farm Boy, they will go from, Stacey's pet store there, and they will swing through at 2 in the morning, cutting across streets. Now, I don't think you can stop that, especially if it is a throwaway. There's no way you can do it. It's going to affect the property value. It's going to affect the noise. There's going to be a lot more, not construction, but the traveling with the vehicles that he's going to have. And you know what? I don't want to have to live through that. And like I said, it's not just for 1 hour, 2 hours a week. You're talking 24/7. And there's nobody here but us three that will be affected by that.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Go ahead.
Doug Malone, 712 City Street. That's my property at the corner. Say it's underutilized. I find peace when I go in my backyard. Fresh air, green grass, animals, rabbits, robins, falcons, and insects. This is my one place of heaven, my one place of free, where I have peace. I'm in that yard every day. It's clear, green grass, open fence. This is my home. Like she said, this is where I live. If you guys approve this, you're changing and putting the parking lot right beside my fence. Yes, there's an existing parking lot, but it's not a dealership. This is my home. And before you consider or make a vote, what I ask you is to think about, like that one gentleman said, I live there. Nobody else lives there. It's all, this is my home. And you're around my home parking lot and the same, and then please, I'm saying no. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make a comment?
I'm going to apologize, I'm slightly deaf, so if I speak up real loud, I'm truly sorry. I live at 727 Sydney Street. I look at this as, it's a residential area, it's not a commercial area. I'm sorry, Pastor Larry, I have to say what I have to say, but we look out and we see beauty. Now, I would challenge anybody in this room that if you own a home and you want to see a commercial parking lot with cars, then move to 7th Street and Pitt Street and Sydney Street. I didn't buy my house to have cars in front of me. I bought my house because it was residential. Now, my thing is, like, how is it going to affect my property taxes? How is it going to affect with all the transportation that they're going to have from 7th up to Sydney? How is that going to vibrate the houses around? Like, it's fine for them to want these properties, but they don't pay for the repairs or the damages that they do. You know, and we always have to pay taxes, but we don't, you know, nobody's helping us out when these things happen. You know, and there's kids there too. You know, there's kids around. Then you've got Farm Boy that's really busy. Now, when people work, they don't see the traffic flow. But you go on Sydney Street at night, and I can guarantee you, that's a raceway. So now, like Mr. Maloney said, public, 8 to 5, but you still have that light at 7th Street. And then you have these trucks coming in and out. So where's the blockage? People don't know, like, that's a straight way, that's a raceway. So there's going to be an accident somewhere. So I'll say like Trevor, you know what, this is our home, and I would challenge or invite you to come and live there and watch this go up and have these fences put up, because it's not pretty. And I'm sure you wouldn't like it. So I have that say, and again, I apologize if I speak loud, but I can't hear, so.
Speech is always appreciated.
But thank you.
Thank you. And I have a question if nobody else has. In the different proposals, how many parking spaces would be lost if we were to adopt the alternative?
Well, it depends, through you, Madam Chair.
It's not an option.
Sorry?
They won't sell the property.
They won't sell the option. They won't sell the property if they can proceed with that
so
option.
not even on the,
We don't do.
yes, Councillor McIntosh.
Could I ask Sean Maloney a question? How many deliveries would you have in the average week? Other the, you know, the trucks bringing cars in?
The average week maybe 2. It depends on the time of year. And that would be on 7th Street. This property is an inventory lot, has to be secured in the lot. We cannot have traffic rolling through there at 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
My insurance company will not allow that. But the vehicle deliveries, they come down to the street and they return back towards the front door.
Okay. And I'm still, right now they're unloading on Pitt?
Yeah, yeah.
Would they continue unloading on Pitt, or,
Yeah.
so that they wouldn't be going over by 7th or Sydney?
They go back to Brookdale.
So as far as the traffic created by deliveries, that doesn't increase for people on 7th and Sydney? Okay.
And Councillor Bergeron?
Well, gate was gonna be my first question. Could you put up a gate? But you answered that. My next one is kind of a hypothetical for you, but I think you'll understand the context. If the church right now wanted to pave its entire property, like some schools do, is that permitted in our official plan?
Through you, Madam Chair. The simple answer is the majority of the site, or a large majority of the site could accommodate a large parking lot.
But that would be the right if they wanted to.
Yes.
It
They
is
would not- they would
it is
not-
grass, but it
they would
could
not-
be parking.
That's correct. They would not require an approval from the Planning Advisory Committee. They could go to the city and make a site plan application and proceed to the development. Mind you, during that process, we would still ensure that there's adequate buffering and whatnot, but at the end of the day, yes, they can proceed with the development of the site, whether it be a large, intensive, multi-residential unit development, a large building, a large institutional building with parking.
Yeah, but they could pave the entire.
Well, not the entire, because there's
With some
landscaping
buffer.
ratios that have to be respected, but a large majority of it could be paved, yes.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? I know this isn't gonna happen because the church wouldn't do this, but they could go ahead and pave it, and they could lease the property to another use to store some cars. And they wouldn't have to go through all this. Oh, they're
Through you, Madam
commercial.
Chair, no,
Okay.
that would be a satellite parking and we
Okay.
wouldn't,
I get you.
And I have another question. Since this involves a change to our official plan, are we the authority on this, or do we have to refer this to somebody else to approve as your head of our official plan?
Through you, Madam Chair, we did circulate the application to our, let's say, Minister Affairs of Kingston. Carl, have you received anything back from them?
I have not as yet.
Yes, Councillor Bash.
Just want to throw this out there because I'm just trying to address everybody's concerns.
Can we just make sure everyone is using their microphone so that everybody could hear?
Sure. Usually that can be heard 3 blocks away, but okay. What if we,
Still too far
is
away,
it
John.
possible to only sell up to, say, the corner of the existing parking lot and then leave the rest as it is? Because that would fix the views and this gentleman's backyard enjoyment, just by cutting off a little square at the end. So the existing parking lot that's there for the church? I hate to stand up and go do this. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
If it cut off here, and this was all, and so this stays the way it is, would that, is it possible, would it satisfy people?
I mean, ultimately, that would be Pastor Blakely, if he would, if, not just solely Pastor Blakely, but his board, would they go for something like that? I mean, anything is achievable through design, through proper design. I mean, it's just,
That, the traffic flow is something I experience every day. It's a frustration with our customers coming to individual restaurants. We've been there for 6 years, trying to grow, we have grown, and one of the strains, and I've got a quotation here from a customer who filled out a Ford survey just in June, and he said to Ford Motor Company that the dealership's in an awkward spot and is too small to match the service times and conveniences of the competition in the area. Parking and getting around, in and out, makes a big difference. Having a vehicle come in and do a loop around and then course another like two-way, we've got two-way traffic from 2 ends and then two-way traffic coming in from the third point of view. I just don't really see, I see that as an opportunity for disaster and accidents. So, I don't have room for having two-lane traffic in 3 different so having a small access out to 7 makes a big difference in traffic.
Thank you.
Safe traffic.
I think everybody who's wanted to ask a question or make a comment has.
I could, sorry.
Very well. We'll hear you.
Carol Maloney, I'm sorry, I'm loud. Mr. Maloney made a comment about a customer who said it's inconvenient. You know what? That's great. But what about us? That customer only goes in to buy, he doesn't live there for 30 years or 33 years. We've been there that long. So now, we're gonna give up the right because a customer finds it inconvenient. I do apologize, Mr. Maloney, but you know what? This is our home. And a customer is a customer. I've been in sales for 35 years. And
Thank you. I think you've made that clear
Thanks.
now. Councilor Garrett, did you want
That's
to
my
say
home
something?
as well.
yeah, well, you know what? You don't live there 24/7.
Councilor Garrett?
Yeah, I feel I'm in a little odd spot here. I put an offer on 712 Sydney 7 years ago, and part of it was because of that beautiful green space that surrounded it. So I feel like I had the opportunity to stand in that yard and say, yeah, I want to live here. And I understand the business component of it. So I feel like I'm gonna really, I have no clue where to go here. So
And, Madam Mayor?
So, I mean, if we hear all the time that there are design solutions to everything, so we obviously have not, this is not ready to go. I just don't feel like this is ready to go. I think there has to be some further discussion around design solutions, because we're at an impasse. I think I understand what Councillor Abad is saying, but I just feel like, there may need to be further discussion amongst the proponents and the neighbors.
And I'll hear Ms. Brisson.
Just for you, Karen. So I just want to say that we've had other dealerships here in Cornwall that have outgrown their spaces as well. And they've just been sometimes, in some cases, lucky enough to be in a commercial zone. I think the question here is simply, do we want to make that area commercial or not? Because the reality is, if we look at the space right now, it's not zoned commercial for him to have his business there. So I think there's many questions leading up to, can we do this? But I'm with you, Madam Mayor. This is not ready to go, in my opinion.
So is that a motion to defer, send it back to planning?
That sure is. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Seconded by? Councilor Bear? All in favor?
No,
Or you wish to speak?
Debate?
Debate on the deferral.
I think we're just prolonging the inevitable, and this is, I don't think it's fair to the proponent or the neighbors to keep them on hold. We're elected to make decisions based on a number of criteria, and I think that we have to make a decision now for the church, for the neighbors, and for the proponent. So I'm gonna talk against the deferral, and hopefully that we can, I have enough information to make a decision tonight.
And having heard you speak against the deferral, now I'll ask for a vote on the deferral.
Can I speak to the deferral?
Sure.
At this point, I would vote against any recommendation. If staff and the proponents had a bit more time to maybe find another solution and it comes back to us, I may vote in favor of. So if we were to just go to a vote today, I will vote against it. But if something else is proposed, I might change my mind. So for everybody's sake, I would love to be able to wait a little bit longer.
So,
Can I ask a question before you call the vote, madam? It's been pretty good. Just to, when did you come up with your Plan B?
Last week?
Last week.
No, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
So when you came up with your Plan B, did you circulate that to the neighbors as well, and everybody had a chance to say what they thought about Plan B? Or did
No.
you just say to Mr. Maloney, here's what we're doing, here's our Plan B, and this is what we're gonna pitch to town?
Through you, Madam Chair. I mean, part of the notification to the public, they have the opportunity to come and speak with planning staff.
Okay.
They get the notification. The residents that did contact the city, okay, I invited them to my office and
Okay.
had a discussion. We discussed the initial proposal and the alternative design.
Another question, did the church have an opportunity to see Plan B?
I did discuss it, and I did send it to Pastor Blakely, Sean Maloney, and the consultant.
See, the thing is, Madam Chair, if I get this right, and the pastor can correct me if I'm wrong, even if, and he didn't sound like he was a big fan of it, but even if he wanted to, he still has to get the congregation to say what they think. So it seems like, while I'm not a big champion of deferral traditionally, I think we take too long to make decisions. I think there may be some validity in the sense that the church has to maybe weigh in on it, the congregation themselves, the neighbors, the local neighbors had an opinion, but maybe the guys across the street. So as much as I'm never always excited about deferral, and I'll wait and see if there's any other discussion, I seem to feel like I'm leaning on those, so we'll see.
and I think there is no other discussion. We'll now vote on the deferral. Those in favor?
To defer?
To defer? Somebody count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Which is, means it's passed.
No.
We have an opposed?
6, oh, is it, wait,
We're a
wait,
committee
no,
of,
wait, I'm forgetting our.
Yeah, you think we're a
Yeah,
council.
Yeah,
so
it's not passed.
Gone.
And opposed? 5 opposed.
Okay, so who didn't vote?
I voted.
Oh, wait, Morris
I
isn't
voted
here.
for.
We
So we're
try it
12.
again, Madam Chair?
Morris isn't
Get the
here.
hands up
Morris
nice and
isn't
high.
here, so we're 12 in the
Section
vote.
5, yeah. They're just another pretty patient.
We can
You're
vote
right
again.
again.
Say I'm only a
Those
pretty
in
face?
favor of the deferral?
Okay, yeah, passes.
So it passes. Thank you. Moving on, we have a couple of CPAC recommendations.
Could I ask one question on the point of order? when does this come back again? Next year this time, or?
Up to the conversation.
No, so we're gonna have a
Meeting.
solution, maybe there's a potential for nomination to look at the alternative.
And if I heard the pastor right, it's pay or nothing.
Moving on now to CPAC recommendations.
Dana McLean is going to speak to 25 2nd Street East and 132 Montreal Road.
Yeah, I know.
And the recommendations were going to be,
I've been in that
Huh?
yard, man.
So we just have two applications that were reviewed by CPAG at our last meeting in July. So this one is actually one that we reviewed the last time, and the owner of the property has asked the city to make a contribution by way of a grant for a small portion. If you want to go ahead, $1,792. So what was approved by PAC the last time and by council, based on the estimate, was $9,630, and that's usually 100% interest-free loan. So in this case, the breakdown, if approved, they're asking for a grant in this much, and then the interest-free loan would be this. So if you just want to go to the next slide. So George Astley Lane, which is owned by the city, and then here is the library parking lot. So they're asking for a proposal for the city to do a contribution to the amount of approximately 17 meters. So the whole laneway is about 81 meters in length, so this would be about a quarter of the cost. Now, they had approached the abutting landowners, and no one was really willing to contribute to it. She came back, and Malian was able to provide an estimate to me. Unfortunately, it was after our last PAC meeting, so I wasn't able to give that information to you then. So this is what they're proposing. So if you want to go to a couple pictures, which I also included in the presentation. So this is the line, property line roughly here, and this is the property on 2nd Street 17 from Mustafa Elgazar, their laneway that attaches to it. So this is in quite an area of disrepair. I did speak with property standards on the property for this as well, and looking to get this cleaned up at the same time, if you want to flip. So, and then this is looking towards the north, down the whole laneway. So they were proposing going right up to here where the city has their parking area, and this would be the sidewalk. So going almost to this line. The city engineer, Michael Fothrop at the time, if you remember my last conversation, we're gonna do some curb cuts along here, along our fence line, to allow the water to slope into the city's property at the same time. So she would include that as part of the city's contribution. So, but this area here is not in good shape. And I have do I have one? Oh yeah. So this is just to remind you of what it looks like. These are all the neighbors that have a right-of-way over the property. The city more or less having two right-of-way through George Astley Lane to get to the library parking lot and then out to Sydney. This one has a right-of-way as well as these two neighbors. These are the only ones that don't have a right-of-way over the property. We've done extensive search on title. There's no wording in there anyway alluding to any type of agreement where they have to contribute. A right-of-way is just that. It allows you to cross the property. Okay. The next application is 132 Montreal Road, which is the old Port Theatre. So they're coming back to us for an addendum for funding for the facade improvement. Based on the estimates that they've provided to us, it would be $6,000 in facade grant. And the possibility I've put in there, they could require building permits if they have to start to remove more brick than just doing the repointing. The first, if you want to go to a slide, up here, the first top 5 feet of it, and the contractor who's priced the project saying, I can't really know for sure 100% until I get up there and start looking at it, taking the top of the parapet off and looking at the condition of the brick. The next slide goes to the front. So this area in here, you can see that it is in disrepair, and this could be caused from connection to the roof and water damage and so forth. So that's what they're looking at. But they are gonna be doing the complete building and repointing of the brick. And again, the grant is up to matching funds of $10,000, so there could be the possibility of their coming back afterwards, once they get up there and see what they find. And that's it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the Port Theater, that would be subject to the bylaw passed under the Heritage Act.
That's correct. It's a designated heritage property, and there's a list that I've provided to you as part of your package, noting what items constitute the heritage portion of it as well. So they will have to make sure that they adhere to that.
Some of the brickwork is.
That's correct.
Is heritage value.
It's been a long time since I was in that theater, and I went last year to see a tribute band. And what he's done inside is really amazing. You know, that building could have sat there and decayed, and I think it's Larry Sabine, his name. Give him a lot of credit for taking it on.
Is there a motion? Mr. Williams, Councilor Calder?
I'll move both items.
Seconded, Madam Mayor. All in favor? Thank you.
Okay, excuse me. We have two information items. As I spoke briefly to earlier on Bill 108, it's quite crucial for us, especially with respect to timelines. I know we mentioned about deferrals tonight. What will happen if it's passed? Right now, for a zoning bylaw, it's 150. They want to take it down to 90. And an official plan amendment is 210. They want to take it down to 120. So these are timelines that planning has once they receive the application to actually approve it if it gets passed. But as I said, the comments are available to be made till August 21st on the site. Secondly, we have tonight before you the data book that's been prepared by Brittany Ruffo. Brittany, did you want to stand up? And she's been our planning student and will continue for the next couple of weeks. She's worked very hard on the data book, and essentially she's provided a cover report for you as well on the front.
Thank you.
Great. And the next scheduled pack is September 6th.
And on that note, I'll call for a motion to the date.
You got a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I guess I missed that.
That's a long day for you.
Status and what's next.